Hey, expat mums, do you want to talk about school? Actually, not about school, but about homeschooling. Because maybe you've wondered whether homeschooling would be a really good option for you and your family, or maybe you've just landed somewhere and there isn't even a school place available for your children yet. Either way, I want to share a little bit about my homeschooling journey with you. I'm Angela. I was an expat for 30 years across 11 different countries. I raised 2 boys overseas, including homeschooling, repatriated, went through an expat divorce and a cancer diagnosis, and I'm here to talk honestly about all of it. So I homeschooled both of my children through a big chunk of our expat life. Not because I had it all figured out, I certainly didn't. And not because I had a teaching qualification, because I didn't have that either. And not because there was a lot of people around me doing the same thing, because there really wasn't. But what I did have was a solid understanding of child development and a lot of experience of just how hard expat transitions are, even for adults. We know that moving house is one of the top 5 stresses in adult life, and that's just moving house, not moving countries or moving schools or saying goodbye to every friend you and your child has ever made. And we've all heard it, haven't we? Children are resilient, but not all of them are. Temperament really matters. Some children are naturally more adaptable than others, and resilience isn't something that children are just born with. It's built over time, and it relies on the right conditions being in place, internally, externally, and socially. Resilience is not a given. So what children need most during big transitions is a sense of safety and security, and homeschooling gave that to my children. Expat moves can be so unpredictable. My ex-husband worked in the hotel business and our moves were about as unpredictable as it gets. One time we even had the appointment for the packers before he had even signed the contract for the new job. And that was pretty stressful. So you can imagine what that means for school. You think you're going to be somewhere for 3 years and the company wants you to move again after just 9 months. Or you arrive mid-semester and there's no space in the international school, or there is space, but the waiting list means that your child can't start until the next semester begins. And nobody really talks about what you're supposed to do in the meantime. You just quietly figure it out all on your own. And then there's the whole school system question. Will it be a British curriculum or an American one? Will it be the IB program? Will your children need to change systems with every single move? Your child isn't just leaving a school, they're leaving their teacher and their friends and their sports team that they finally made and their music lessons that they just started and learning support that you fought for. There's layers and layers and layers of loss on an already enormous transition. And then they arrive somewhere new and you have to start from scratch all over again. In the early years especially, children really don't have the language to be able to understand what's going on during these moves. They rely on us for safety and regulation. And for me, it just felt like too much for my children to handle. So we decided that we would homeschool. Now, I wasn't a qualified teacher, but I had taught English around the world for many years before I had children. I loved learning myself. I was great with crafts. And honestly, my ADHD brain was all over the idea of homeschooling. How could it go wrong? Well, let me tell you, homeschooling is not for the faint-hearted. It's flippin' hard, especially when you're moving so often and you don't have any kind of support network around you when you first arrive. But the hardest part for me wasn't the day-to-day stuff, even though that was hard. The hardest part for me was the judgment of others. The biggest and most common judgment that you will hear, and homeschoolers are going to know exactly what I'm about to say, is what about socialization? And I kind of sort of understand where that concern comes from, but I'm not entirely convinced that putting a group of children that are all the same age, born in the same year, into a classroom for 6 hours a day is really what we mean by socialization. I mean, where else in life does that happen? My children were living in different countries, exploring different cultures, spending time with people from all walks of life and all ages. They were completely comfortable talking to anyone, anywhere. So socialization was never a problem for them. Now, having regular friends who they could grow up with, that was a challenge of the expat life, not a problem with homeschooling. The second judgment is that you need to be qualified. And I'm a bit torn on this one too, because I think some people hear you don't need a qualification to homeschool and assume that that means you can just wake up in the morning and let your children do whatever they want throughout the day with zero structure. And that's not what it means at all. What you don't need is a degree in education or a teaching qualification. But what you absolutely do need is curiosity. You're going to need to want to learn alongside your children. You need to understand how children develop, even a little bit, and what they need at each stage of their development. And you need to show up with intention and commitment because children don't feel safe in chaos. They feel safe with predictability and boundaries. Child-led does not mean that the child controls everything. I still had high expectations of my children. You can ask them and they remember. I still set firm boundaries. And even though we were quite flexible day to day, and even if you are structured, homeschooling realistically only takes a few hours of structured learning a day, if that anyway. But we had a lot of freedom to learn experientially. And that's very different from just letting children do whatever they want. There are so many labels in the homeschooling community, even among homeschoolers themselves. And honestly, I never really identified with any of them. You've got homeschoolers and home educators. Some people don't like the term homeschoolers. Then you've got unschoolers and world schoolers. There are so many, it's hard to keep up. We did a little bit of everything depending on where we were and what stage the children were at, and honestly, how my brain and mental capacity was doing that week. In the early years, it was mostly about exploring and reading and spending a ridiculous amount of time in the kitchen. As they got older, I picked up a proper structured program because my ADHD brain needed that scaffolding as much as they did. But the learning I'm most proud of happened out in the world, in the places that we visited and the people that we met and the communities that we were a part of. My goal was never really academic. It was to instill a love of learning and an awareness that their education was ultimately up to them. That's what I wanted for them. And because I believe that children learn when they feel most comfortable in the environment, I never intended that they would never go to school. I wanted it to be their choice. So they should experience both sides before deciding, because you can't choose between two things if you haven't experienced both. Or I think it's definitely easier to make that decision. So at primary age, I encourage both of them to give it a year and have a go and see what they think. My eldest son chose to go into 4th grade and he settled in beautifully and never looked back. My younger son, because his brother was going in 4th grade, wanted to go at the same time. So he tried 2nd grade. But here's the thing, we had just spent 3 years living on a tiny island in Tahiti that you can drive around in just over an hour. The boys were basically living like Robinson Crusoe for 3 years. So this big, highly structured American international school was just too much, too fast. His nervous system needed a little bit more time to adjust. So we pulled him out and continued homeschooling and focused on helping him feel settled and regulated again. And when he was ready to try again, and he really wanted to go to school, the most wonderful headmaster allowed him to come in just for the non-academic activities. So it was PE and computer class and art class and library time. And so we were able to ease him back in gradually. And when he felt ready, he moved into 3rd grade with a brilliantly supportive teacher, and he never looked back either. And I know not every school will be able to accommodate that. We were so lucky. But I share that with you because you never know what's possible, and you should always ask. When I look back on those years and I talk to the boys about it, what I know mattered most was that no matter what changed around us, the country, the language, the friends, the house, the rhythm of our days stayed the same. I was their anchor. They knew what to expect. And that consistency, that sameness right in the middle of all the chaos is what gave them their foundation. Homeschooling was the best decision that I ever made. And the second best was letting them decide when they were ready to go to school. And I want to be really clear that that wasn't me handing over control to them. That was me knowing my children well enough to trust that when they said they were ready, they meant it. And it certainly wasn't a day-to-day decision either. They had to commit to 1 year before they decided whether they preferred schooling or homeschooling. They couldn't just wake up in the morning and say, today I want to homeschool and tomorrow I'll go to school. And they did try it and they did love it. And to be honest, if they would have chosen homeschooling moving forward, we would have made that work too. But I'm really glad that they were so happy in school. And all of this I was figuring out completely alone. There was no community around me, no one to share their experience other than the odd homeschooling mom that I bumped into at the poolside who was staying at our hotel on vacation. And speaking to some more experienced homeschooling moms was enormously valuable to me. So I just followed my instincts and did what I knew and learned as I went and got on with it. And that's a big part of why I developed Raising Change globally, because no expat mom should have to figure this stuff out on her own, whether that's homeschooling or transitions or just the weight of holding everything together when the world around you keeps changing. So if any of this resonated with you, I would love for you to subscribe. I share videos like this every week. And if you want to go deeper, come and find us on Raising Change globally. The link is below. There is zero pressure. Just come as you are. Thanks for joining me wherever you are in the world. I'll see you next time.